Welcome back to Andy and Anna Talks, where we delve into the pivotal issues shaping our world today. And today, we're looking at something that, on the surface, seems like a pretty standard trade issue, new U.S. tariffs on India. But we're going to unpack how this is actually having some, well, surprisingly big ripple effects on a sector you might not expect, India's huge tech industry.
It really is a fascinating case study, isn't it? It shows just how interconnected everything is globally. You hear about tariffs on physical goods, and your first thought probably isn't about digital services. But these new U.S. tariffs, they're definitely causing waves in the IT world over in India.
Exactly. So the U.S. has brought in this 26% tariff on a bunch of Indian products, textiles, auto parts, electronics, gems, jewelry, that sort of thing. Now, if you just look at that list, yeah, it sounds like it's all about manufacturing physical stuff. But the thing is, as we've seen, a massive chunk of revenue for India's big tech players like Infosys, TCS, Wipro, HCL comes from U.S. clients. We're talking over half their business, actually. So even though their software isn't being taxed at the border, well, they're still pretty exposed when things get shaky in the U.S. economy.
And that exposure, that's the key indirect link we need to understand. These tariffs, okay, they target goods, but they inject this layer of economic uncertainty into the U.S. market. And when companies feel uncertain, one of the first places they often look to cut back is discretionary spending. And sometimes new IT projects fall into that category, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's break that down a bit more. The tariffs are on, say, auto parts. How does that uncertainty, as you put it, actually trickle down to potentially slow things for an Indian IT firm?
Well, think about it from the U.S. client's perspective. If they're suddenly paying more for imported components, or maybe they're worried these tariffs will hurt demand for their products,
Yeah.
they're naturally going to tighten their belts, right? Be more cautious with their overall budget. And that caution can easily lead them to say, okay, let's pause that big IT system upgrade, or maybe even let's cancel that new software development project we were planning just to save cash.
Right, conserve capital. And this isn't just a hypothetical scenario, is it? We've actually seen this happen already.
We have, yeah. Wipro CEO Srinivas Pallia, he mentioned recently that a U.S. client actually put a major SAP program on hold, and they specifically cited concerns related to these tariffs as the reason.
Wow, an SAP program, those are usually pretty significant core business projects.
Exactly. It's a big deal to pause something like that. It really shows how this wider economic unease, triggered partly by the tariffs, is leading to real caution in IT investment decisions.
So it's a clear example of that indirect effect. It's not a direct tax, but the environment created by the tax makes a major client hit the brakes on a big IT spend. And it looks like this kind of caution might already be showing up in IT hiring numbers too.
Yes, that seems to be the case. The Naukri JobSpeak Index, it tracks hiring trends in India. It showed a noticeable dip for IT back in March 2025. I think it was down 2.5% compared to the year before, and actually down 8% just from the previous month, February. So yeah, that suggests a definite cooling in IT hiring, which could well be linked, at least partially, to this tariff-related uncertainty.
Okay, so it's less about the tariff itself hitting IT directly and more about this broader cloud of economic uncertainty it creates. And this uncertainty, it's landing on top of some economic challenges the U.S. was already facing, right?
Exactly. We can't forget the context. The U.S. has been dealing with post-COVID inflation. That had already prompted many companies across lots of sectors, including tech, to start looking for ways to cut costs and be more efficient. These tariffs just add another layer of potential economic pressure onto that existing situation.
And then you hear reports like JP Morgan apparently raising the odds of a U.S. recession, maybe even a global one, to 60% after the tariffs were announced. That surely doesn't help confidence.
Not at all. That kind of prediction just fuels the uncertainty. If businesses start seriously worrying about a recession, well, the demand for outsourced IT services from places like India is likely to take a further hit as American companies really clamp down on spending.
Yeah.
The fortunes of the Indian IT sector are, very closely tied to the economic health of the U.S. It's undeniable.
Right. Okay, so the problem is clear. Tariffs, U.S. uncertainty, Ash's clients, potential hit for Indian IT. So what are the Indian tech companies actually doing to handle this? What are their strategies?
Well, they're not just sitting back, obviously. They're taking a few key approaches. One big one is cost optimization, really focusing on running leaner, being more efficient in how they operate, rather than just pushing for massive expansion right now.
So it's about efficiency over pure growth for the time being.
You could say that, yes. They're also really trying to zero in on what they call high-impact projects.
Well,
Basically, focusing their efforts on the kind of work that delivers really clear, measurable value, back to the client. The thinking is, even if budgets are tight, clients are less likely to cut projects that provide a strong, obvious return on investment.
Makes sense. Prove your value, especially when money's tight.
And alongside that, they're working on improving workforce utilization, making sure they're getting the most out of the skilled people they already have.
Okay. And what about reducing that heavy reliance on the U.S. market? That seems like a big risk factor here.
Definitely. Diversification is absolutely crucial. Indian IT firms are actively putting more effort into exploring opportunities elsewhere. We're seeing a bigger push into markets like Europe, the Asia-Pacific region, and the Middle East. It's a classic risk mitigation strategy. Really don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Spreading the risk, building resilience. Smart.
Exactly. And the other major pillar of their strategy is investing in new tech. They're doubling down on emerging areas. Think AI, cloud computing, cybersecurity. These are high-demand fields. By building stronger capabilities and offering more sophisticated services here, they aim to stay competitive and attract clients who need those advanced solutions, regardless of broader economic trends.
So it's a mix of internal efficiency, proving value, spreading geographically, and staying ahead technologically. That sounds pretty comprehensive. What about the governments? Are they involved in trying to smooth things over?
Oh, absolutely. Government policy and diplomacy are huge here. India and the U.S. are actually in talks right now. They've committed to negotiating a bilateral trade agreement, aiming to get it done by fall 2025. And the goal they've stated is pretty ambitious, doubling bilateral trade to $500 billion by 2030.
Wow, $500 billion. So a successful trade deal could potentially calm these waters quite a bit.
Potentially, yes. If they can reach a good agreement, it could ease some of the current trade friction and create a more stable, predictable environment for businesses working across both countries. That would be a big help.
And it sounds like India's putting some serious offers on the table to make this happen.
Reports do suggest that yes, India seems to have offered some deep cuts to its own import tariffs on various U.S. goods to, move the talks forward.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not all straightforward. They've also signaled they want to keep high tariffs on certain sensitive areas, like some agricultural products.
Ah, okay. So it's complex. There are sticking points, domestic sensitivities to manage on both sides.
Exactly. These negotiations are tricky, balancing different interests. But they are incredibly important. The outcome will really shape the trade relationship for years to come, and that will definitely impact the Indian tech sector's future engagement with the U.S. market.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what's the outlook for Indian IT in the immediate future? Sounds like a bit of a cloudy forecast.
I'd say uncertain is the key word for the near term, yes. The indirect effects from these U.S. tariffs, the impact on client spending, the general economic jitters, those are likely to remain a challenge for a while.
But we should also remember, the Indian IT sector isn't exactly new to challenges. It has a pretty strong track record.
That's a very important point. It's historically been incredibly resilient. Time and again, the sector has shown it can adapt through innovation, through smart strategic shifts, by finding new ways to deliver value. They've navigated choppy waters before.
So the recipe seems to be staying nimble, keeping that diversification going, and really paying attention to what happens with these trade policies.
Precisely. Agility is key. Continuing to broaden their client base and their service offerings beyond just the U.S. is vital. And staying engaged with policymakers in both India and the U.S. is also crucial to make sure the industry's needs are understood. So yes, there are challenges right now, definitely. But with the right strategies, the right collaborations, there's still strong potential for the Indian IT industry to keep growing.
That's all for today's deep dive. We hope this discussion has offered some valuable insights into, well, just how interconnected our global economy is, and how policies that might seem aimed at one area, like tariffs on goods, can send significant ripples through a completely different sector, like India's tech industry. Stay tuned for our next exploration into the forces shaping our world. Until then, stay informed and stay engaged. And maybe something to think about. Considering how many global service industries rely heavily on particular markets, what other sectors out there might be vulnerable to these kinds of indirect impacts from seemingly unrelated trade policies?